What's happening, guys? Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, and you can see behind me that we have our Murano in here that we're putting the motor in. So we're going to be putting an engine in this thing. I'm not going to take you guys along for the full engine job because this would be a massive video. So I think what we're going to do, we're going to split this one up into two parts. We're going to do the first part of actually removing the engine, getting it out, and then showing you what went wrong with it. We're going to try to find out what went wrong with it. And then the second part will be us putting it back in again and getting everything running. So this video would be, no matter how I film it, it's going to be a long video. So I wanted to kind of split it up a little bit. We're also using a little bit newer of a resolution here. We're filming at 2.7K, 24 frames a second, which should give you a little bit more of your typical movie motion instead of the 60 frame stuff, which can really get, I don't know, it almost looks a little bit weird. It looks a little unnatural. So we're going to try this, see how it goes. But today what we're going to do is, I actually already started with this thing yesterday, and to kind of save you guys the boringness of the underneath of the vehicle, we already removed the exhaust, which turned into an interesting issue. So this thing has zero compression whatsoever. The engine just spins and spins and spins, and we obviously had to cut the exhaust off. Well, we didn't know that the owner had spent several days trying to get this thing to start, which means that this resonator became a fuel tank, this pipe became the fuel filler neck, and this muffler became a gigantic bomb, which when we cut the bolts out, did that. It shook this entire shop. It shook the dust out of the ceiling. So now we have a little bit extra. We gotta pound that back into place and fix it. But yeah, just the hazards of doing a job like this. Unfortunately, I could have probably been a little bit more proactive and realized that, you know, the general public will tend to do things that most human beings would find dangerous. But yeah, so what we're gonna do today is we gotta remove the drive shaft. We gotta pull the wheels and tires and the knuckles and a few other odds and ends, and then we're going to go up on top, and that's when I'm going to bring you guys back in, because the stuff is just entirely too boring underneath the car, and plus it's very difficult to film because it's so dark. So I'm going to continue pulling all the stuff out from underneath the car. Once we get the underside prepped, we'll get all the stuff out of the top side of the car. We'll disconnect all the hoses, all the lines, all the wiring harnesses, all that stuff, and then we're actually going to drop the engine and transmission right out the bottom of this vehicle, which is going to be pretty cool. I love doing these because they're very satisfying. So once we get that engine out, we'll try to figure out what went wrong with this thing. Why did it die? We already did a quick check, pulled the valve cover cap, the oil filler cap, cranked the engine over, and the camshafts are spinning. So it's very good possibility that the timing jumped and it smashed every valve in the motor. I mean, there's not a single cylinder that has compression in this engine. So interesting. It'll be cool to see what happened to it. So stick with me, guys, and we'll bring it back when we're ready to hit the top. So here's our current progress. So we got calipers off, struts unbolted, we got the transmission cooler lines, which are right up in there. We got those all disconnected. We come back here, we got the sway bar links disconnected. You can see the knuckle better there is disconnected. There's a wire back here that you have to make sure you get, otherwise it tears it out of the body. Drive shaft disconnected, steering shaft bolt out and moving, so that's good. Then on the passenger side, same exact thing. All of this is out, calipers off, knuckles unbolted, and power steering line is disconnected there. So on the bottom, we are 100% good to go. We got the coolant line disconnected under here. We're pretty much good to go. Now, the only thing that you need to do to drop this subframe, once we get all the top stuff done, which I'll time lapse for you guys so you can actually see some action, is there's a bolt here, one here, one here, and one here. And that is literally the 4 bolts that will allow you to drop this entire assembly to the ground. So we're going to be dropping everything that you see there. All of that whole section right there, everything will come right out of the vehicle. We'll get it on the ground, then we'll be able to take the motor off of the subframe. Once we get the motor off the subframe, at that point, then we can see what we got. We can put the new motor on the subframe, we can get all that stuff done. So, oh, one thing I forgot. right here. We're going to take all these lower bolts out here for the transmission so that we don't have to do them while the thing's on the ground, because that makes for a massive nightmare. So we're going to do that, get that done real quick, and then we'll be good to go for the top. So we've come to the point now where we are going to remove all of this. We got to get everything out of the engine bay. The battery box. We got to get the air cleaner completely out, the engine cover, some of these little accessories in here, a lot of these plastics, all this stuff. Once we get all this out, we'll have access to anything that is connected to the top of the motor, such as that guy, the motor mount that sits on the top. There's a motor mount that mounts to the body. We got to see if there's any sort of transmission mount that mounts to the body. And then we got to pull the AC lines and everything else and get all that stuff out of the way, and then we can drop this thing out. And that's our goal for tonight. We want to drop this thing out of here, get it on the ground, take a look at it, and then tomorrow we're going to take everything from over here, that motor, and we're going to then put that back on the cradle and put everything back up in the vehicle and get everything good. So I like to usually take 2 to 3 days to do these. And the reason being is because you can slam it all into one day, but if you slam it all into one day, you run the risk of messing something up or forgetting something or doing something like that. So the way that I do most of my engine swaps, especially when it's for a customer vehicle, is we spend one full day removing the engine, tidying everything up, getting any broken bolts or anything all situated. The second day we'll spend replacing the old motor with the new motor, putting it back on the cradle, getting it back in the vehicle and hooking everything back up again. And then the third day, we'll usually add all the fluids, get everything running, take it out for a test drive and make sure it's good. Then we can send it and know that we are 100% where we need to be. So with that being said, I'm going to set you guys up on the time lapse, and we will get everything out of the top of the motor and try to get this motor out of the car. lady and gentlemen, I give you an engine out of a Murano. Hey, so as you saw, it was actually pretty easy. Once we got all the bolts out, just dropped right out. No problemo. You just got to make sure that all your lines are disconnected. Like, we forgot to disconnect the fuel line and the power steering line, but we got those. So just go up slow and you'll be able to, pull these things out, no problem. Drive shaft doesn't even have to come all the way out. None of the radiator, none of that stuff has to come out. You literally just disconnect everything. The whole harness right here disconnects from the computer, and you can just flop it over the motor and everything is good. The whole suspension comes out. You just got to disconnect it from the struts, disconnect the steering shaft, exhaust, and there you have it. It's a pretty simple process, really, and it literally comes right out. I mean, obviously I say simple because it's sitting on a lift. If you don't have a lift, then it's obviously a little bit more complicated than that, but there we go. So now what we're going to do is the largest transmission on the face of the planet needs to be separated from this engine. Now, if you remember, we already went underneath. We got all the bolts from underneath. We got all of the torque converter bolts as well, which is going to make our life a whole lot easier because we're not going to have to get on the ground and actually do all that stuff. We got to pull this engine off of the cradle. We got to take the alternator, power steering pump, AC condenser, and a compressor and any other accessories that we might need off the front of that motor and put it on the other one. So that is what we are going to do for tomorrow. For tonight, I'm exhausted, so we're going to leave it off here. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Stay tuned for tomorrow or possibly Thursday for part 3. Yeah, stay tuned tomorrow or possibly Thursday for part 2 of this, where we start swapping everything over and getting the engine back in the car. We're going to start that first thing tomorrow morning. I'll film it, probably have a video for you by tomorrow afternoon, if not on Thursday. But yeah, as you can see with a lift, I mean, and just basic tools, we didn't really use a whole lot of tools on this. You disconnect everything, it drops right out. We're going to pop the other one over onto the stand. We're going to get everything together with that. We're going to get all the accessories off the old one, put them on the new one, and then throw it back up in the car. So, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Stay tuned for tomorrow for part 2, and we will get this thing back in the car and get this car back on its way. So, thanks again for watching. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button. Click the little bell icon so you get notified when I post. Pardon me if I'm saying things over and over again, but I'm exhausted because I've been doing that thing all day. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah.